Christmas dinner smelled of turkey and betrayal. My son Brandon raised his glass, his voice sharp enough to slice through the heavy silence. "We've voted, Dad. You're no longer part of this family. Get out of this house." The room froze. Before we go any further, if my story has found you, hit subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to see just how far my words can travel. His wife, Megan, gave the smallest smile, and I returned it with one of my own as I slid a folder across the table. "Here's a little parting gift for you, son." Brandon opened it, and the scream that tore out of him echoed through the dining room. Everyone stared, clueless that my revenge had only just begun. They believed they had finished me. They couldn't have been more wrong. The air smelled less like holiday cheer and more like roasted potatoes mixed with resentment. Our old oak table, scarred from decades of meals, now bore the weight of another kind of battle. Plates sat dirty and untouched. Coffee sat cold in chipped mugs. Brandon stood at the head, red-faced, his hands moving wildly like some kind of conductor of chaos. Across from me, Megan leaned back with her arms crossed, tapping her manicured nails against the table in a rhythm that dripped with disdain. I tightened my hold on the fork, its cold steel the only thing grounding me as their words cut like knives. "We need the money, Dad," Brandon snapped, loud enough to make the glasses tremble. "This house is falling apart. You can't just sit on your savings while we're stuck here." I lifted an eyebrow and kept my voice calm. "Savings? I paid off this house before you were even born, Brandon. So, what's this really about?" Megan leaned forward, her smile thin as the ice outside. "It's about progress, Henry. We want new floors, new furniture. You wouldn't understand." But I did understand. The repairs were just a front. Megan's phone, propped against her wine glass, showed a glossy photo of a leather sectional that cost more than my old pickup ever did. Brandon, now pacing, threw a folded piece of paper onto the table, an inflated contractor's estimate stuffed with unnecessary upgrades. I didn't need to open it. They'd already spent every dollar in their heads. "You've got savings, Dad," Brandon pushed harder, his voice rising. "What's the point of keeping it? You're not getting any younger." That jab landed, but I kept my gaze steady, tracing an old scratch in the table from the time Brandon carved his initials with a butter knife at age 10, back when he still thought I was his hero. My voice dropped low. "I've given you enough. You live here rent-free. That's more than most kids get." Megan let out a scoff, her laugh sharp and mocking. "This place is a museum, Henry. We're doing you a favor by staying here." Brandon slammed his spoon down, the clatter echoing. "You're so damn selfish. You think you're some saint, but all you do is hold us back." Silence filled the room, pressing against my chest. My knuckles went white around the fork. It wasn't the first time he'd raised his voice, but this moment carried something heavier. Final. Megan's eyes glittered with triumph, like she'd been waiting for this all along. I could have shouted back. I could have listed every sacrifice, the overtime shifts, the tuition checks, the car I sold just so he could drive his first junker. But words wouldn't reach them now. "Selfish," I repeated, letting the word linger. "That's what you think." Brandon leaned closer, his breath reeking of wine. "Damn right. You're not needed here anymore, Dad. We can handle this place without you." The air shifted, thick with the weight of his words. Megan's lips curled, satisfaction barely hidden. I set the fork down carefully and stood. My chair scraped against the hardwood, the sound louder than it should have been. I looked at both of them, their faces painted with greed and certainty. They thought they'd won. "I see," I said, my voice steady even as fire burned in my chest. "You've made yourselves clear." Turning away, my boots heavy against the floor, I headed for the hall. Brandon called after me, mocking. "What, that's it? You're just gonna sulk off?" I didn't answer. The chipped paint of the dining room door loomed ahead, a reminder of better days. As I reached for the knob, one thought cut through the fog of betrayal. I had given him everything. My time, my dreams, my home. No more. The door clicked shut behind me, muffling their voices. I stood in the hallway, my heartbeat steadying. They thought they could break me. They were wrong. I'd show them what selfish really meant. My bedroom felt like a time capsule, every corner whispering of a life I had built and then lost. The wooden bed creaked as I sat down, the mattress sagging under years of restless nights. A single lamp cast a warm glow, catching dust on a framed photo of Linda and Brandon when he was 6. His gap-toothed grin stared back, so different from the man who had just screamed that I wasn't needed. My fingers brushed the glass, trembling slightly. How had it come to this? The house was silent now, the kind of silence that only makes your thoughts louder. I opened the nightstand drawer and pulled out an old photo album, its leather worn smooth with age. Flipping through, I stopped at a picture of Brandon at 16, clutching a football, his eyes glowing with dreams I had helped pay for. I remembered selling my Chevy so he could afford his college applications, telling Linda it was just a car. She used to squeeze my hand and smile like she knew better, and I believed her. We both thought it was worth it. Another page in the album, another memory. Brandon's graduation. I had worked double shifts on construction sites, my back screaming from the hours, just to cover his tuition. That day he hugged me in his cap and gown, swearing he'd make me proud. I believed him. Now the memory twists like a knife. He never once said thank you. Not once. And after Linda's cancer took her 3 years ago, he drifted further away, leaving me alone in this house that used to feel full. Until Megan showed up, her sharp ambition digging into him like claws. I turned the page and found an old, yellowed receipt. Tuition payment, $12,000, 2005. I drained my savings for it, telling myself it was an investment in his future, our future. I thought he'd carry on the family name, maybe even share the life I'd built. Instead, he brought home Megan, her cold eyes scanning the house like it was a prize waiting to be claimed. She changed him. Or maybe she just revealed who he always was. The album snapped shut, and I set it aside, my eyes drifting to Linda's photo. Her curls, her warm eyes, they had always steadied me. I tried, Liz. I whispered, my voice rough. I gave him everything. But trying hadn't been enough. Not when he stood in my dining room spitting venom, fueled by a woman who saw me only as an obstacle. The fork I had gripped earlier flashed in my memory, its weight reminding me of the anger I'd buried. No more burying. I walked to the window. Outside, snow drifted down in slow, heavy flakes, covering the street in white. The neighborhood slept, Christmas lights glowing faint through the haze. I pressed my hand to the cold glass. My reflection stared back at me, gray hair, tired eyes, but a jaw locked with purpose. I'd spent decades being the father who provided, who forgave, who waited. And for what? To be told I wasn't needed. A memory surfaced. Brandon at 8, slamming his bedroom door after I grounded him. Even then he had a temper, but he always came back with an apology, sheepish, eyes down. That boy was gone. The man standing in my dining room didn't deserve my patience. Neither did Megan, with her calculated smiles and her dreams of a life she hadn't earned. I picked up my phone. The screen glowed in the dim room. My thumb hovered over Mark's number. He'd know where to start. He'd seen the world's ugliness and walked out swinging. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft but relentless. I wasn't a victim anymore. I had been their foundation for too long. It was time to build something new. The old bar smelled of whiskey and worn leather, its low lights casting long shadows across the paneled walls. I sat in a corner booth, the vinyl seat creaking under me, a glass of bourbon in my hands. Across from me, Mark sipped his beer, his gray sweater as frayed as his patience. We'd been friends since the days we argued over blueprints at the engineering firm, back when life made sense. Now he was a retired lawyer with a gift for cutting through the nonsense. I told him everything. Brandon's shouting, Megan's smirks, the way they tried to gut me with words. Mark listened, his eyes narrowing, the lines on his face deepening. When I finished, he set his glass down, the clink loud in the quiet bar. "They're vultures, Henry," he growled. "Think they can pick you apart just because you're old. You gonna let them?" I swirled the bourbon, watching the amber light catch. "No. I'm done letting them." Mark's grin spread, rare and dangerous. "Good. Hit 'em where it hurts. Money, pride. Find their weak spot." I nodded, my mind already working. Brandon was impulsive, always chasing the next shiny thing. A new car, a bigger TV. Megan was worse, her ego tied to appearances. Her Instagram feed was a shrine to a life she couldn't afford. They thought they could bully me out of my own home. I'd show them what a lifetime of planning could do. "Legally," I added, meeting his gaze. "No mistakes." He chuckled, leaning back. Spoken like the guy who double-checked every contract I ever drafted. "You've got this, Henry. They don't know who they're messing with." I pulled a small notebook from my coat pocket and flipped it open. My pen scratched across the page, the word accounts standing out in black ink. Brandon's finances were a mess. I'd seen the late notices he tried to hide, the way Megan flinched when the credit card reader beeped too long. That was my opening. "You're scarier than I thought," Mark said, raising his glass. "To justice." I clinked mine against his. "To consequences." The bar buzzed around us, a low hum of voices and bottles clinking. A jukebox in the corner played some old country tune, the kind Linda used to hum in the kitchen. I pushed the thought away. Nostalgia wouldn't help me now. Mark leaned in, his voice low. "You sure about this? Once you start, there's no turning back." I met his eyes, steady. "They made their choice. Now I make mine." He nodded, a glint of respect in his gaze. "Then don't flinch. They'll squirm when you tighten the screws." I slipped the notebook back into my coat pocket, my fingers brushing the rough fabric as my plan began to take shape. The plan was coming together, piece by piece, like the blueprints I used to draw back when I was an engineer. I used to build things meant to last. This time, I was building their downfall, brick by careful brick. I stood, tossed a few bills on the table, and left the bourbon untouched, its surface still and flat. "Thanks, Mark. I'll call you." He waved me off. "Don't call. Just do it." The door of the old bar groaned as I pushed it open, cold air biting at my face. Snow crunched beneath my boots, the streetlights throwing pale halos across the empty sidewalk. My breath hung in the air, but my thoughts were razor-sharp. Brandon thought he could erase me. Megan thought she could outsmart me. They'd built their lives on my foundation, and I knew exactly where the cracks were. The snow fell heavier, each flake reminding me of the storm I was about to unleash. The kitchen was dark, except for the thin glow of my phone's flashlight cutting through the shadows. The oak table, once the place for family dinners, was now a battlefield of scattered bills, receipts, and a crumpled bank notice. Brandon had left them lying out, careless as always, thinking I wouldn't bother to look. My old sweater snagged against the chair as I leaned closer. Each document was a window into their world, and I was prying it open. A credit card statement glared back at me. $12,000 in debt. Designer clothes, restaurant tabs. Half the charges in Megan's name, including a $2,000 handbag that could have paid the heating bill twice. I let out a bitter smile. She mocked my outdated house while bleeding money she didn't have. Brandon wasn't much better. Late car payments, a gym membership he never used. Their greed was a house of cards, and I was ready to pull the first one. My fingers froze on a bank notice stamped in red, overdue. 2 missed mortgage payments on that little condo they bought last year. Brandon bragged about it at dinner, swearing it would make them rich. Megan had nodded, scrolling through glossy photos of luxury lofts like she already owned one. Now the bank was threatening foreclosure. I copied the account number into my notebook, the scratch of my pen loud in the stillness. And then the memory hit, Megan sneering at my dining room carpet just last week, calling it tacky. She twirled her fork like a queen with a scepter, saying the house needed modern elegance. Brandon had laughed with her, while I stared at the photos on the wall, wondering when my son stopped seeing this place as home. That carpet. Linda and I picked it together, hours in the store, back and forth until we finally agreed. They didn't just want to rip it up. They wanted to erase her. Erase me. The house groaned above me, a creak in the hallway. My heart thudded. I killed the flashlight, plunging the kitchen into black. I pressed myself against the counter, every sense on high alert. Nothing but the fridge humming, the old clock ticking in the living room. I exhaled slow, steady. They were upstairs, probably asleep, clueless about the trap they'd handed me. I flicked the light back on and kept digging. A wine club subscription. A spa day receipt. Every line another thread in the web they'd spun. My engineering days had taught me to find weak points in a structure, the cracks that would bring the whole thing down. Their finances were already crumbling. I was just making sure they felt every tremor. My notebook filled with dates, account numbers, dollar signs. I slipped the foreclosure notice into my pocket, careful not to crumple it. This wasn't just about money. It was about control, showing them I wasn't the relic they thought I was. I had built this house, this life. And they wanted to take it without a fight. Big mistake. Another creak. Louder. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, coming down the stairs. Brandon. I snapped the notebook shut, shoved it into my pocket, and slid the papers back into their messy pile. Flashlight off. I edged toward the kitchen door, boots silent on tile. My hand brushed the doorframe, would cool beneath my fingers. I froze. His voice cut through the dark, groggy but suspicious. Dad. I didn't answer. My pulse stayed steady, my mind sharp. They'd given me the weapon I needed, wrapped in their own carelessness. I eased the door open just enough, the hinges smooth from years of my maintenance. The hallway was dark, Brandon's shadow stretching at the far end. I slipped out, breath tight in my chest, and melted into the shadows of the house I knew better than he ever would. The next morning, I sat across from David, my lawyer. His office was the opposite of my home, glass walls, gray carpet, the sharp scent of ink and coffee in the air. My old coat hung over the chair, a folder of notes spread between us. Outside, the New York City skyline glinted cold under a pale winter sun. David, crisp suit and all, scanned my scribbled figures, his pen clicking in rhythm. I'd known David since my engineering days, back when we wrestled through contracts at the firm. He was sharp, discreet, never wasted words. "You're sure about this, Henry?" he asked, voice low, eyes flicking up from the page. "It's a bold move." I nodded, hands steady on the table. "They crossed a line, David. I'm taking back what's mine." He leaned back, tapping his pen against his chin. "All right. Let's start with the will. You want Brandon out?" "Completely. Completely." The word felt heavy. Final. For a moment, guilt stabbed at me. He was still my son, the boy who once clung to my hand at the county fair. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who spit in my face. I shoved the thought aside and focused on the papers David slid toward me. The first was a revised will. Everything, my house, my savings, would go to a local charity. Brandon and Megan wouldn't see a dime. I read every line carefully, the old contract habits kicking in. Every clause was airtight, exactly as I wanted. When I signed, the scratch of the pen felt like quiet victory. The second document was a bank form. Freezing the joint account. Brandon still used it, a relic from when I'd helped him buy his first car. He'd never bothered to close it. Now his laziness would cost him. David watched me, unreadable. "You're cutting deep, Henry. They'll feel this." "They should have thought about that before," I said, my voice calm but edged with steel. I pulled out my phone, dialed the bank, and after a short call, the account was locked. Brandon wouldn't know until he tried to spend. I could already picture the panic. We moved to the house next. David suggested a trust, putting the property out of Brandon's reach. "If you're sole trustee, they can't force a sale," he explained, scribbling notes. And if they try to push you out, this keeps you standing firm. I nodded, signed where he pointed. The house was my last fortress, the only thing I'd built that still stood strong. Every nail, every shingle was mine. And I'd be damned if they turned it into their ATM. Each stroke of the pen felt like driving a hammer, sealing their fate. David stacked the papers, his voice softening. You okay, Henry? This isn't easy. I know. My jaw clenched. It's necessary. They made their choice. He didn't push. We shook hands, and I tucked the folder under my arm. Heavy, grounding. As I stepped toward the door, my phone buzzed. Brandon's name. Missed call. My pulse kicked, but I didn't answer. He was already feeling the ground shift, even if he didn't know why. The office door shut softly behind me, swallowed by the city's hum. The cold bit into my coat as I stepped onto the street. Snow dusted my shoulders, melting into the wool. The folder wasn't just paper, it was a shield, a weapon, a map to justice. Brandon's call meant he was rattled. Good. That was just the start. Later, the living room glowed with the TV's flicker, some reality show droning in the background. Brandon paced the rug, his phone clutched like a lifeline, the glow cutting hard shadows across his face. Megan sprawled on the leather couch, calm and smug, the opposite of his fury. I stood hidden in the kitchen's dark, the door cracked just enough. My phone was in my hand, recording every word, every shout. They didn't know I was listening. Didn't know the ground was already crumbling under them. You see this? Brandon's voice cracked as he shoved his phone at Megan. The accounts are frozen. I tried to pay the car loan, it bounced. Bounced. Megan arched a brow, her voice cool. Calm down, Brandon. Probably just a glitch. Call the bank. I did. He flung a magazine onto the floor, pages scattering. They said it's locked by the primary holder. That's Dad, Megan. He did this. I pressed closer to the door, knuckles tight around my phone. The bank had moved faster than I expected. Brandon's anger was raw, loud. But it was Megan's reaction I wanted to see. She shifted, nails tapping against the couch arm. Your father? Why would he bother? Because he's spiteful, Brandon snapped, pacing harder. He's been sulking ever since we asked for the money. You heard him. He thinks he owns us. Megan's lips curved into a slow, cold smile. Then maybe it's time he leaves. That house is too big for him anyway. We could sell it. Move somewhere better. Somewhere modern. My chest tightened, but I stayed still, phone steady. Sell my house. The one I built with Linda, where we raised Brandon. Where her laughter still lingers in the walls. They weren't just greedy, they were ruthless. I forced my breath steady. Every word was evidence. Every syllable was fuel. Brandon finally stopped pacing, shoulders slumping. You think we can just kick him out? Megan leaned forward, her voice dropping low, like a conspirator whispering poison. He's old, Brandon. Vulnerable. We'll say it's for his own good. Find him a little apartment somewhere cheap. The house stays with us. It's only fair. Fair. The word burned, but I didn't move. My thumb hovered over the phone, the recorder still ticking. They were plotting right in front of me, blind to the noose tightening around their necks. I'd always known they were selfish, but this? This was lower than I imagined. My home, my life, reduced to a stepping stone for their ambitions. Brandon hesitated, running a hand through his hair. He won't go quietly. You know how stubborn he is. Then we make him, Megan snapped, her voice sharp. We'll talk to a lawyer, figure out our options. He can't stay here forever, dragging us down with him. The TV flickered, a canned laugh track clashing against the tension. I eased back into the shadows, boots silent on the tile. Megan crossed to the window, checking the lock. She was thorough. I'd give her that. But not thorough enough. My phone vibrated as the recording saved, every word sealed, evidence against them. I slipped out, the kitchen door closing with a soft click behind me. My heart pounded, but my head was clear. They thought they could erase me. But they'd just given me everything I needed. Their plan was sloppy, reckless, built on arrogance. And I would use it. Let their own words dig the grave they thought was mine. Later that night, the new lock gleamed on my front door, brass shining under the porch light. My key, worn from years of use, didn't fit. I stood on the stoop, breath clouding in the frozen air, snowflakes settling on my coat. The house, my house, suddenly felt like it belonged to strangers. Brandon and Megan had moved faster than I expected. I twisted the key again, metal scraping uselessly. A knot of cold anger tightened in my chest. They weren't just fighting back. They were erasing me. I stepped away, scanning the windows. Curtains drawn, living room dark. But I knew they were inside, probably gloating. Earlier, I'd overheard a cousin's voicemail. Brandon and Megan had already hired a lawyer. They were claiming I was unstable, unfit to manage my own affairs. They'd spread the story to relatives, painting me as some senile old man. And this new lock, it wasn't just a barrier. It was a declaration of war. I circled the house, boots crunching in the snow. The side door, new deadbolt, locked tight. My fingers brushed the frame, and for a moment I saw Linda laughing that summer we painted it together, her voice mixing with the smell of fresh paint. The memory stung, but I shoved it down. Sentiment wouldn't help me now. I needed a way in, or a way to make this blow up in their faces. Inside, I could picture it. Brandon pacing, voice sharp as he barked at their lawyer. Megan calm, her words precise, twisting the story into something noble. I could almost hear her. It's for his own good. He can't live alone anymore. My jaw locked. They didn't know me at all. I pulled out my phone, the screen harsh against the night. Mark's number was at the top of my calls. I dialed, leaning against the garage. They changed the locks, I said when he picked up. And they're telling everyone I'm crazy. Mark's laugh was dry, humorless. Bold move for a couple of amateurs. You got a plan. Working on it, I said, eyes on the house. They're digging their own grave. I just need to push. Don't let them rattle you, he warned. They're scared. That's why they're pulling this stunt. Scared or not, they'd crossed a line. I hung up, slid the phone into my pocket. Snow fell heavier, blanketing the yard in silence. The back door was locked, too. No surprise. As I turned away, my phone buzzed again. A text. Karen, my sister-in-law. Henry, what's going on? Brandon says you're not well. Call me. I stared at the message, thumb hovering. They'd gotten to Karen, too. Spinning lies to anyone who'd listen. The sting was sharp, but it didn't break me. It fueled me. They thought they could isolate me, turn family against me. They had no idea how far I'd go to protect what was mine. I pocketed the phone, headed down the driveway, snow muffling my steps. The street was quiet. Christmas lights blinked from the neighbors' houses, warmth mocking the cold radiating from my own. I stopped at the curb, looked back at the locked door. They thought they'd boxed me out. But I built that house. Every beam, every nail. I knew its secrets better than they ever would. Let them gloat. I'd find my way back in. The cafe smelled of burnt coffee and cinnamon, holiday shoppers crowding the wooden tables. I sat by the window, hands wrapped around a chipped mug, steam rising in slow curls. Across from me, Rachel fidgeted with her spoon, her red scarf bright against the gray afternoon. She'd been Linda's friend for decades, one of the few who still checked on me after the funeral. Now, her eyes were wide with worry, her voice barely above a whisper as she leaned closer. Henry, I heard something you need to know, Rachel said, glancing around like someone might overhear. Brandon and Megan are planning a big Christmas dinner. They've invited the whole family, Karen, your cousins, everyone. They're going to make an announcement. I sipped my coffee, keeping my face neutral. What kind of announcement? Rachel hesitated, her spoon clinking against her cup. They're saying you're unfit. That you've lost control of the house, your finances. They want to declare you incompetent. Maybe even push for guardianship. They're using the dinner to get everyone on their side. The words hit like a punch, but I didn't flinch. I set the mug down, its base scraping the table, and leaned back. So that was their game. Public humiliation, dressed up as concern, a way to strip me of everything. I could picture it already. Brandon raising a glass, his voice full of fake sincerity. Megan nodding along, smiling that knife-sharp smile. The family shocked, maybe even convinced, especially after the rumors they'd already spread. How'd you hear this? I asked, keeping my tone calm despite the fire in my chest. Karen mentioned it, Rachel said, her voice even lower. She's worried. But Brandon's got her half convinced you're not yourself. Megan's been calling everyone, telling them you're a danger to yourself. It's awful, Henry. I nodded, pulling out my phone. Opened the Notes app. My thumbs moved fast. Christmas dinner. Family. Announcement. Guardianship. Each word a piece of their plan, and I was already turning it over in my mind, looking for cracks. They thought they could ambush me, use the holiday warmth to mask betrayal. But all they'd done was hand me an opening, a stage to flip the script. Rachel watched me, her brow furrowed. You're not surprised, are you? I'm not, I said, sliding the phone back into my pocket. They've been building to this. I just didn't think they'd play so dirty. She reached across the table, her hand hovering near mine. What are you going to do? You can't let them get away with this. I met her gaze, my jaw tight. I won't. They're counting on me to crumble. They'll get a surprise instead. Rachel's eyes softened, but she didn't push. She knew me well enough to trust I'd handle it. I stood, tossed a few bills on the table, pulled on my coat. The cafe door jingled as I stepped outside, cold air biting at my face. Snow dusted the sidewalk, clinging to my boots. My phone buzzed. Another message from Karen. Probably more questions I wasn't going to answer. I ignored it, my mind racing. Christmas dinner was their trap, but it could be mine, too. They wanted a spectacle, a victory. I'd give them one, just not the kind they expected. The streetlights flickered on, stretching long shadows across the snow. I checked my notes again, the words glowing back at me. They'd opened a door to their own downfall. And I was ready to step through. Later, the lawyer's office gleamed with glass and steel, the air humming with efficiency. I sat across from David, my folder spread on the polished table, papers laid out like a battle map. He adjusted his glasses, scanning the stack I'd prepared, eviction notices for Brandon and Megan, a court order freezing their shared accounts, a list of their debts meticulously cross-referenced. My engineer's precision had served me well. Every detail accounted for. Every loophole sealed. This is ironclad, David said, his clipped voice carrying approval. The eviction notice is valid, backed by the trust you set up. They'll have 30 days to vacate once it's served. And the account freeze, effective immediately. You've got them cornered. I nodded, signing the final page. The pen's weight felt like a gavel. Each stroke a step closer to justice. And the evidence? I asked, tapping the folder. Inside were recordings, bank statements, even screenshots of Megan's texts to relatives, all proving their intent to defraud me. Nights of work, my dining room table turned into a war room of receipts and notes. David slid the folder into his briefcase. More than enough. If they try to fight, this will bury them in court. You've done your homework. I leaned back, the chair creaking under me. Homework. That's what it felt like, methodical, relentless, the same way I once tackled blueprints. But this wasn't about buildings. It was about tearing down the lies Brandon and Megan had built around my life. For a moment, the thought of my son, the boy small enough to carry in my arms, gnawed at me. But I shoved it down. Regret wouldn't finish this. Next stop was the bank. A sterile box in the mall's heart, its gray walls lined with posters about savings plans. The young banker, tie crooked, fingers flying across the keyboard, typed furiously as I confirmed the freeze on Brandon's accounts. "All set, Mr. Wilson," he said, voice nervous, like he could sense the weight of what I was doing. I thanked him, tucked the confirmation slip into my folder. The numbers were locked now. No more handbags for Megan. No more reckless loans for Brandon. Back in David's office, we sealed the final piece, a letter to be served at Christmas dinner, outlining their eviction and the consequences of every stunt they'd pulled. I slid it into a plain envelope, edges crisp, and slipped it into my briefcase. Inside, the folder held everything: their debts, their lies, their recorded betrayal. My ace in the hole. David rose, offered his hand. "You're ready, Henry. They won't see this coming." I shook it, my grip firm. They never do. Outside, the glass doors closed behind me, swallowed by the mall's holiday buzz. Shoppers hurried past, arms heavy with gift bags, Christmas lights glittering overhead. For a moment, the decorations pulled me back. Linda stringing lights on our porch every December, her laughter in the cold air. The memory softened me. Only for a moment. Brandon had chosen his path. And I'd chosen mine. Snow fell as I crossed the parking lot, dusting my coat. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve, the dinner, their stage, their trap. They thought they'd humiliate me, rally the family, break me in front of everyone. But I had the folder. The letter. The truth. Let them set the table. I'd bring the reckoning. The dining room glowed with candles, roasted turkey and pine mixing in the air. The old oak table was draped in a white cloth, Linda's china laid out like ghosts of better days. Relatives and neighbors filled the chairs, Karen, cousins, even a few from down the street. Faces full of unease. Brandon stood at the head, wine glass raised, smile polished, a new watch gleaming on his wrist. Megan sat beside him, posture perfect, her eyes lit with quiet triumph. I sat opposite, hands folded, a plain folder hidden beneath my chair. They thought this was their night. They were wrong. Brandon cleared his throat. The room went silent, forks stilling. "Thank you all for coming," he said, loud, rehearsed. "This Christmas is special. It's about family, about moving forward. But there's something we need to address." I watched him, calm, though my pulse thudded. The folder under my chair felt heavy, sharp. Brandon's gaze flicked at me, disdain flashing in his eyes. He lifted his glass higher. "Dad, we've talked about this. You're not well. This house, this life, it's too much for you. We've voted as a family. You're no longer part of it. It's time for you to leave." Gasps rippled. Karen's hand flew to her mouth. My cousin Mark leaned forward, scowling. Megan's smile widened, thin, sharp, her nod sealing the knife. Whispers spread, the guests darting looks between me and Brandon. They'd heard his lies about my instability. Now they waited for me to collapse. I rose slowly, deliberate, the scrape of my chair loud against the floor. Every eye followed me. The air was thick, expectant. "Is that so, Brandon?" My voice steady, almost soft. "That's right," he said, smirking, emboldened. "It's for your own good, Dad. You'll thank us later." I reached down, pulled the folder from beneath my chair. Its plain cover drew curious glances, but Brandon didn't flinch. Megan leaned close to him, whispered, fingers brushing his arm. I stepped forward, holding the folder out. "A parting gift then," I said, my tone light, but edged with steel. "Open it." Brandon hesitated. His smirk cracked. He took it, fingers trembling like the paper might burn. The room stilled, candle flames flickering shadows across his face. He opened the folder. First page, an eviction notice, bold, unyielding, addressed to him and Megan. His breath caught. He flipped again, court order freezing their accounts. Another turn, lists of debts, receipts, the transcript of their recorded plot. "What is this?" he shouted, voice cracking. Papers slipped from his hands, scattering across the table, sliding to rest against the turkey platter. You can't do this. I already have. My eyes locked on his. You thought you could take my home, my life, and call it yours. Read the rest. It's all there, your debts, your plans, your words. Megan snatched a page, her face blanching as she read. This is a lie, she snapped, but her voice wavered, her composure unraveling. The guests leaned in, whispers growing into gasps. Karen stood, snatched another page, her eyes widening at the texts, the bank notices, the transcript. Brandon, is this true? Her voice cut sharp. You tried to sell his house? Brandon stammered, glass slipping from his hand, red wine bleeding across the white cloth. It's not what it looks like. I stepped back and let the chaos unfold. The folder was my weapon, and it had struck clean. Megan's eyes darted across the room, searching for allies. She found none. Brandon's face burned red, his hands shaking as he clawed at the papers. I stood still, my heart steady. Years of weight lifted. They'd set the stage, but I'd rewritten the ending. The dining room stormed alive. Voices clashed, wine spilled, papers scattered like ash across the table. Brandon slumped in his chair, head in his hands, the eviction notice crumpled in his fist. Megan clutched a napkin so tight her nails tore through it, her polished image cracking. Brandon, explain this. Karen's voice cut through the noise, a bank statement raised high. You told us Henry was losing his mind. But this says you planned to sell his house. Brandon's head snapped up, eyes wild. It's not true. He twisted everything. We were trying to help him. Help. Mark barked, snatching a page. This is a recording of you plotting to kick him out. You called him a burden. Megan stepped forward, smile forced, voice trembling. Everyone, please, calm down. There's been a misunderstanding. We only wanted what's best for Henry. Best. Rachel, Linda's old friend, shoved back her chair, pointing at her. You lied. You spread rumors. You said he was crazy, just to steal his home. The room erupted. Guests on their feet, grabbing papers, whispering, shouting. Even the children shrank back, hiding behind their parents. Megan's mascara streaked, her composure gone. Brandon lunged for the folder, desperate, but Karen yanked it away, disgust written across her face. Enough, Brandon, she snapped. You've shamed this family. He turned to me then, voice breaking. Dad, please, tell them it's a mistake. We didn't mean it like that. I met his eyes, cold. You meant every word. You made your choice. Live with it. Megan clutched his arm, her voice a hiss. Henry, please, we're sorry. We'll fix it. Just don't do this. We can work it out. I shook my head. You had years to work it out. You chose greed instead. Guests moved toward the door, coats pulled on, disgust clear on their faces. Mark tossed a paper back onto the table, muttering, disgrace. Karen paused at the door, eyes soft with apology. I should have known better, Henry. I'm sorry. I nodded. Said nothing. The truth spoke louder than any apology. Brandon's shoulders shook, his voice rising to a plea. Dad, you can't throw us out. This is our home too. It's mine, I said. My words final. Always was. I turned, walking toward the living room. The noise faded behind me. Megan's voice cracked, begging, but I didn't stop. The dining room door swung shut, muffling her cries. I stood in the dark, Christmas lights glowing faint through the window. Family photos lined the wall. Linda's smile still there, steady. I straightened one frame with my hand, then let it go. Outside, car doors slammed, engines started. The house grew quiet. Brandon and Megan still begged, but it was finished. They'd built the trap. I turned it on them. The front door slammed. Silence. I didn't look back. The apartment was small. Bare walls, boxes stacked, the smell of fresh paint still in the air. But the wide window opened to the New York City skyline, lights winking through falling snow. I sat at a simple desk, lamp glowing over a blank sheet of paper. The pen in my hand felt heavy, not with ink, but with everything left unsaid. A photo of Linda sat on the shelf, her smile steadying me as I began to write. The house was gone. Sold quick, to a young family who'd fill it with laughter again. The price was good. Enough to start over here, in this quiet place where the past couldn't cling so tight. Each signature had been a step toward freedom. Brandon and Megan vanished after that Christmas dinner. Their belongings were gone before the eviction deadline. I hadn't heard from Brandon or Megan since, and I didn't expect to. Some bridges burn so completely, there's nothing left but ash. I pressed the pen to the paper. The words came slow, steady. Brandon, I wrote, my handwriting firm despite the ache in my chest. I spent years wondering where I went wrong, what I could have done to keep you close. But you chose your path, and I had to choose mine. I forgive you. Not because you've earned it, but because I need to move on. This is goodbye. Simple words. But they carried everything, the love I once had, the betrayal that broke it, the peace I was claiming now. I folded the letter, slipped it into a plain envelope. My fingers lingered on the paper before I set it down. Forgiveness wasn't for them. It was for me. I'd carried their weight long enough. Outside, snow fell in heavy silence, blanketing the city. I crossed to the window, my reflection faint in the glass. The skyline stretched sharp and endless, softened by the storm. I had built a life once, in a house filled with laughter. That life was gone. But I wasn't. I was still here. Still standing. With years left to shape something new. By the door sat a small box of keepsakes, Linda's scarf, a drawing Brandon made when he was 6, an old engineering contract. I'd unpack them when the time felt right. For now, the quiet was enough. The memory of Christmas dinner flickered, Brandon's shout, Megan's tears, the family's shock. But it felt distant now, like a story I'd heard rather than lived. I picked up the envelope, slid it into my coat pocket. The post office was just a short walk. I'd mail it tonight. Maybe he'd read it. Maybe he wouldn't. It didn't matter. I'd said what I needed to say. The desk lamp flickered, its glow catching on the falling snow outside, each flake a spark in the dark. I pulled on my coat, the envelope crinkling against my chest. The apartment door clicked shut behind me, soft, final. The hallway was empty. The city waited beyond, alive with possibility. I stepped into the elevator, boots leaving faint wet prints on the floor. Snow would keep falling, covering the old paths, opening new ones. I was ready to walk them. And if my story stayed with you, tap that like button and subscribe. It lets me know you're here, and it helps this story reach the people who might need it most.